Kari Lake is a former Arizona gubernatorial candidate who was no stranger to the spotlight when she started up her campaign. She spent decades in the mainstream news business as anchor of a network affiliate TV station before leaving it all behind to try to fix the state she loves. The race was decided by about half a percentage point, 17,000 votes. But it may not be the total end of the story. Please welcome to our show in Nashville, Kari Lake. You've got fans here.
Oh my gosh, you get this adoration every night?
I don't get it, but my guests do.
Oh,
they don't like me,
so
but
much.
They love the people that we bring to the theater.
How
That's
many
the thing.
Arizonans do we have out there? Any?
We got some Arizona people?
Hello.
Ah.
I see them over there.
You know what they're doing? They're all moving to Tennessee, I think.
Well, I'll tell you
They're
what.
so frustrated with this election. We're all frustrated with this.
Arizona's a red state. We're a conservative state. And to watch our elections be taken like this, and that's why I'm still fighting, because I know what I saw on the campaign trail. We saw crowds like this every single day, and the people are so excited, and we want to keep our state sane. And I ran against somebody who didn't even get out of her basement.
Yeah.
So we know funny business when we see it, and that's why we're going to continue to fight it in the courts.
It was one of the races that I looked at and followed. And first of all, I'm not just saying because you were here. I've said this to you before. I thought you were the most articulate, forceful candidate that I saw in the entire election cycle.
Thank you so much.
You were a phenomenal candidate. The way that you dealt with the press was so impressive. You weren't hateful, but you were as good as my daughter in handling the press, and that's saying something
good.
for me.
Well, I'm going to be honest. I learned a thing or two from Sarah Huckabee, okay? She really knew how to handle it, and they can be so nasty.
Yeah.
I used to get so upset watching them handle your daughter.
Yeah.
Rude, just rude people. And because I worked 30 years in the media, I know their tricks. And one thing I started doing early on in the campaign, I thought, you know what? I'm going to put the camera on them. And so we would do an interview with them, and we would put the camera and the microphone. They would ask a stupid question. They would ask a nasty question, and we would put that out all over the internet and embarrass them. And I'll tell you what, by the end of the campaign, Governor, they started behaving.
So I'm watching this whole race. I'm thinking, well, there's one race I'm sure of, and that's Kari Lake is going to be governor of Arizona. And, you know, we kind of go to bed that night thinking it's all going to go that way. So help us understand, what did in fact happen?
Well, in Arizona, we vote for a month, and then we count votes for 2 weeks until we get the outcome that they want. And sadly, this is where we come to. And what happened was they knew our people were showing up on Election Day. 75% of the voters on Election Day were voting for me. And we know that because that's what the exit polling was showing.
Yeah.
And they sabotaged Election Day. On Election Day, all of a sudden, the ballot printers were printing out a 19-inch ballot on a 20-inch ballot paper, and that caused the computers to jam, and it caused people to not have their votes counted. And then we found out they added 25,000 additional votes 2 days later after Election Day, 300,000 ballots that didn't have chain of custody. We don't know where they came from.
So far, it's been a tough slog, and the courts have said, nope, we're not going to take a look at that. It's not that they said you were wrong. They didn't really do the audit. Is that a fair assessment of what's happened?
We sued, and we had 10 counts, and the judge he said, I will listen to 2 counts. He gave us the 2 hardest to prove, but we did a great job proving it. I don't know if you followed it. And he ruled against us, unfortunately. So now we're in the appeals court. Good news is they've taken it based on merit, and we're going to push it to the Arizona Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court if we have to, because we know we won. And we have to fight this. We have to fight it now.
Have the ballots been preserved?
Well, we hope they've been preserved. Unfortunately, the 2 men who run Maricopa County is a mega county, which it's also a MAGA county, by the way, but it's also a mega county, which means it's one of those massive counties where if you win that county, the whole state, it has to go that way because it's so big. 62% of our population lives in Maricopa County.
Wow.
And the 2 men running the election are both Republicans, sadly, but they ran a super PAC raising tens of thousands of dollars to defeat me. And here they are running the election. I'm on the ballot. They didn't want election deniers because I understand what happened in 2020. I did some research, and I know that we had a bad election in 2020. We can't keep having stolen elections or we won't have a country much longer.
There's something, I think, troubling to all of us when a ballot for electing our leaders is about as secure as getting the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstake in the mail.
That might be more secure.
Well, it might be. You know, the chance that we're going to send it back and get $10 million. And a lot of people are scratching their head saying, is that really an effective way to carry out election integrity? And obviously it isn't.
I have a home, homeowners association, and our elections for our HOA board are more secure than the elections in Arizona. It shouldn't be that way. We need secure elections. I started voting in 1988. I'm going to date myself here. Registered as a Republican because I was so inspired by the president of my youth, Ronald Reagan, who grew up about an hour away from me, a couple decades apart, mind you. And I was so inspired by him. I really admired him as a youngster, and he was the president of my youth. And so he inspired me to register as a Republican. Back then, you voted on Election Day, and you knew the results election night. This is not impossible. It's not brain surgery. We can do it. And we just need small, small precinct voting, and we can do it. We can count that on election night. We don't have to make it so complicated with tens of millions of dollars in machines where we don't know how the machines work. They won't show us the software. We know that the components to these machines are bought and made by our adversaries in China. I mean, imagine that. We're having China build the components to our voting tabulation machines, and they won't tell us how they work. It's fraught with fraud, and we need to fix this right now because I want my kids to have a free, I want them to live in a free America, not in communism.
I know you've spent your life mostly in Arizona, but obviously when you run for governor, you look at the whole country. What scares you the most that you see taking place in America? Something motivated you to leave the comfort of a wonderful job as a TV anchor to throw yourself into politics. What was it that you saw out there and you said, I got to get involved?
I walked away from my career of 30 years broadcasting as a journalist because I felt that during COVID, there was an agenda being pushed, and I really saw it strongly, and I didn't want to be part of putting out half-truths. I'm a Christian. A half-truth is a lie. A half-truth is a lie, right?
Yeah.
And there wasn't an interest to put out the full story. And I started seeing that, and I thought, I don't want to lend my heart and my mouth and my voice to this. So I walked away. An amazing thing happened. I put out a video telling the people why I was leaving. And the people started reaching out to me by the thousands saying, thank you for being honest. We appreciate you. Thank you for covering Arizona. Would you please run for office? And I thought, okay, they must think I'm crazy because I just left the world of fake news. And now they want me to go into the even more corrupt world of politics. I don't know whether to love them or hate them. But
well, I'm glad
I didn't even know how to run for office. I had to call the Arizona Republican office and say, AZ GOP, and say, how do you run for office? Because there's not really a booklet on how to do it if you're just a citizen stepping forward. And
it should be easier to run, not harder. But you know what we're seeing? We're seeing more people like you who are not career politicians who say, here am I, Lord, send me. And I mean, I think that's one of the most positive things. We're seeing it at the school board level and city council, and it's beginning to make an impact. So if you had the magic button that you could push and change the country, what would that button do?
Oh, boy. Well, you know how I feel about the elections. We want to have fair elections, so that would be a real easy one. But I really want to see what they're doing to our kids change. I mean, we learned so much about what's happening in our schools, and they're going after our kids' minds. Our kids' minds are so malleable.
Yeah.
Think of all the things that kids believe in, and thankfully we have innocence in their minds, and then they go off to school, and the things being taught to them. So I wish we could have a really solid, positive education for our kids so that they leave high school. Back when I was a kid, you would get an education. If you wanted to get trade skill training, you could actually leave high school ready for a career. And I don't feel we're doing that well right now. So that was one of my platform ideas. I'd like to see our border become secure so that we're not having millions of people pouring across.
And you live in a border state, Arizona, so you see a lot of the impact of people just coming across. We have no idea who they are, why they're here. what they're going to do when they get here.
And so many of our problems are based on that wide open border. We have people being smuggled in, trafficked, children being trafficked into God knows what. We have drugs pouring in. Arizona is the fentanyl pipeline for America, and that is not something we're proud of. We got to stop that. You know, you look at what fentanyl's doing, it's taking a young generation. I talked to so many moms and dads on the campaign trail. Hardest thing ever is to see a mom grab you and say, I lost my 19-year-old son. He's gone. And think of what we've accomplished in our lives from the age we were 19 or 20. And a whole generation of young people are being taken because we don't secure our border. And President Trump did a great job with that. Joe Biden came in, not to get too political, but I'm going to get political.
I've never done that on the show, not me.
He came in on day one within the first 10 minutes and he pulled back a border policy that was working brilliantly. President Trump secured that border. And we need to get back to that. We need to secure the border.
We've about run out of time, but the obvious question, are we going to see Kari Lake on the ballot again, regardless of how this court challenge comes out?
Well, my number one priority is to see this court challenge through. I believe, I pray to God, and before this election happened, I had this uneasy feeling because, I mean, my opponent is in charge of the election. I mean, that's kind of crazy, right? And I just had this feeling, an uneasy feeling, and I said, God, it's all about you. He put me in this position. This fantastical journey he put me on. And I said, whatever has to happen. If it has to go one way or another, I know that I'm putting my life in your hand. This is all in your hands. I think more people needed to wake up to what's happening with our election. So I'm going to see this through. We'll take it all the way to the Supreme Court, and we'll see what happens. I don't want to start looking at Plan B, because once you take your focus off what's important, then you don't have all of your energy going into that. So I'm going to see this through, and we'll see what happens. But we have a movement in Arizona. This was not some forced thing. This was moms and dads. I called them my mama bears and papa bears and students and grandma bears. And they came out and said, we want to change in Arizona. And that movement is still as strong and powerful today as it was on November 8th. And so we're going to do what we have to do, but we're not letting it go.
I have a feeling we are not seeing the last of Kari Lake, and she'll be a spokesperson for the cause that we need in this country. Now, for our audience, if you want to keep up with Kari Lake on social media, all the links to follow her and the Kari Lake War Room are in one place for you at Huckabee.tv. Please go there and connect to Kari Lake and find out how you can keep connecting with her. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I hope you will now. The button is just below this video, and there's a little bell next to it. If you click on those, YouTube will reluctantly start letting you know when we've got a new video uploaded.